Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Transformation Leaders Podcast. And just a quick reminder for your possible significant other, we're almost at Valentine's Day. Don't forget to buy something. Anyway, we're back talking about the series that we've been going on, the evolution of digital transformation. This is kind of a continuation along what we discussed last week. Sean had a really excellent presentation for us. If you hadn't had a chance to see that, go back and check that particular podcast out. And then today we're going to pick up with that theme again with innovation in 2026 and what we might be able to do. And once again, just like last week, Sean's put together a really impressive deck, of course, using AI and the notable Notebook LLM, which is just fantastic. If you haven't checked it out, you're really, really missing out. So Sean, you want to kick us off and talk about this moat that you've got here? Looks like something
Absolutely.
from Star Wars.
So those of us out there that are founders who have built software companies before understand the concept of moat. So the moat is how you can use technology to create a defense or shield against competition so that when you go to market, your salespeople have a competitive advantage that your competitors cannot touch. And that is a moat, right? So whether it be Google and their search functionality, that's a pretty big moat, right? You have social media and, Meta with Facebook, again, another moat. Apple has their app, their ecosystem, their walled garden, if you will, is their moat. So what is your moat and how do you create a moat and how do you keep a moat is really what this is all about. And in 2026, the world has changed a lot with AI. So I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about innovation strategy, how you could create a winning organization around innovation that will fuel your sales and protect your product and enrich your customers. So let's jump right into it. And, starting that features and commodities and speed are the only currency. So again, we experienced this in our day job recently. 3-4 years ago, there were chatbots, right? Those chatbots were very much business-oriented, IVR trees and whatnot. When you call in for support, you hit 1, you hit 2, these kind of things. Then eventually you could talk. And about 3 or 4 years ago, you could just say, hey, I want to talk to support. And if you say the word support, it knows to automatically dial the support number. And then we started having chatbots where you could go in and have a conversation with AI. And then that died last year with agentics because people just don't want to have a conversation. They want to actually do something and accomplish something with their time. And this changed over a period of 3 years. From 3 years ago to today, the landscape has changed. So this gives you 2 lessons. One is this idea of commodity is kind of no longer appropriate, which is kind of a negative. If you spend a lot of time on features and product, you expect to have time. Well, unfortunately, AI isn't going to give you that. But here is the advantage. And that is if you are behind, you can catch up and you could skip generations, which we're seeing a lot of people do with AI. Make sense, David?
It does. Matter of fact, I'd even also add that the people that have just come onto the scene have not even had to deal with anything other than just leapfrog to the front because they came in, they knew how to use the tech, and they just accelerated themselves right to the front of the line. So, Now the other thing too is that AI as with all things, it comes with the learning curve. I just want to give a shameless or selfless plug. Sean and I are always happy to help you out with any of these challenges or conundrums that you guys have. A lot of the stuff that we talk here online every week, you can pick up on a lot of that information as we move forward. But we have over, I think about it, a little over a year now of shows there where we've been on this bandwagon for a while. And we've had a couple of really great, interesting guests on the show. So, yeah, stay tuned for that as we continue along with this series. But yeah, no, completely agree with everything that you've got here. I was personally surprised about chatbots on how quickly they rose. It feels like because of agentics, there's not a loss of love, but a less of an emphasis on ChatGPT, the user interface. And a lot of AI automations. I think you're going to see a lot of stuff shift into that direction too.
Yeah. I mean, so, let's kind of explore this a little bit more of why this is the case. So, when you have a legacy moat, you have all this technical debt that is there. And you have to spend a lot of time getting it out, right? And we talked a little bit about technical debt last time around, but what I want to focus really on is that if you really think you could spend 5% slowly iterating and be able to get what is necessary or keep your moat, it's not going to be possible. The traditional barriers, whether it be geographic, capital, or regulation, have evaporated. Being able to go through and take a code set and make it align to a certain compliance now is a matter of minutes, not months. So, in the future, right, you're going to have to constantly be replacing aged infrastructure and making room for new technology if you're going to keep your moat, right? So, let's talk about the autonomy, what makes up a modern moat today, right? It is architectural superiority. It isn't that you have the best tech. You have the best people and processes to consume change. That's what's going to provide you your moat. You can move fast. That is what's important. Back in the day, they said move fast and break stuff, right? Well, now we're not allowed to break stuff. We just got to move fast, right? So number one is having your data right. We talk about this all the time, but being able to have data that is accurate, that is available, that is empowering is so important, right? Having a group of workers who have agency, right? People who are using AI that is accomplishing things that users or humans don't want to do. And then the cost per outcome getting better. We talked about this last time around as well. This is how you have a fortress, not a moat, right? That's how you do it. The moat is just an offshoot or an outcome of building the fortress. David?
Yeah, I think everything goes back into the whole emphasis around data. I love how that is number one, front and center. Everything definitely has to live there. There is a huge component. We've talked about this again before too. I just want to kind of relate some additional things that we've talked about. And observability in AI, observability in the last show, I did call out, I think, Splunk. These are systems that allow you to gain analytical insight in what's going on, especially within your data. But making sure that you, again, are always having a focus of the outcome of where you're going to go. So as you try to build these moats and your fortresses and things of all of that nature, really understanding these holistically and knowing how the pieces fit together, I think, are going to be essential. And observability is going to be a big part of that.
Yep. If you don't have the data to do your work without rebuilding all your data, if you take too much time, too much effort, too much cost to impact change, if you do not have people and technology that can handle the details at the bottom, you are not going to survive. The world is moving too fast. So let's talk about the cultural component of this moat, right? The greatest threat is institutional siloing. Innovation happens at the edge, right? What you do is, if you look at state A, this is what a lot of Fortune 500 companies are, right? You have ideas at the bottom and they bubble up to the top. And sometimes they make it all the way up to the top and something happens. But if you have the three necessary pieces we talked about before, you have innovation happening everywhere, at every level. That is what is necessary to be able to take innovation into the future. So let's talk about, how we go through and understand, what I call the honesty audit questions, right? If you're in the room and saying, what is the thing that we don't want to talk about? And let's talk about that. Because you're not going to be able to have an innovative environment if there are sacred cows, right? You can't do it. Now, the second thing that I ask people to do and be honest is, okay, let's put on our startup hat on and say, if we were going to compete with ourselves, how would we win? What do we need to do to beat ourselves, right? What is the most difficult competitor we could think up in our mind, right? Talk to the salespeople. They're your radar, right? They understand what the market is and where the desire lies. The difference between what is eye candy, which are things that generate a whole bunch of thought and discussion, but no money, and what is true desire. What is something that people will pay money for? Your salespeople know this. Talk to them. Talk to the support organization. They understand where all their customers are upset. What is the friction people have with your products and services? What are the things that you are letting them down? I know it's not fun. I've been there doing postmortems, talking to customers who say, hey, this, that, and the other. And guess what? There's a silver lining. If a customer is yelling at you and telling you what you're doing wrong, they're still paying the bills, right? So take the opportunity, listen to them, and bring that information back so that you can learn from it. And then lastly, your engineering teams are the amazing miracle makers, right? They know what is possible. So you could say, here's the problem, what is the solution, and how much does it cost, right? And if you are really solid in your thinking and approach, you will bring in these thought leaders in your organization, have these kind of honest conversations, and build innovation strategies based upon it. David?
Sean, as you were saying that, I almost have a grin on my face. And it's because a lot of companies are doing this now and they don't even know that they're doing it. They've already conjured up their worst competition or competed against themselves. And it does start with sales. Listen to your salespeople. Join the sales calls, especially ones where the engineers may or may not be on. Let me share a familiar story to probably most of you, especially if you sell products and it probably even maybe some services too. If you hear your salespeople starting to embellish or create vaporware of features that don't exist in your products, or embellish on services that aren't quite rounded out where they need to be, and then you see your engineers starting to cringe or things of that nature, because it's like, where is this feature or where is this coming from? These are the indicators of the gaps, the holes, the missing, whatever it is, and then find out the frequency. It's one thing to have an anomaly where you have a call where one thing unfolds, but if you start having a repeating pattern where these things keep coming up, you might need to get a hold of your product teams and your ownership to figure out what exactly are the holes, and is the tail wagging the dog, or are you going to pioneer your own outcome? And that is really some critical thinking that is going to need to go on, along with some thought leadership and just generalized leadership. You may need a big transformation. The market, the industry may have pivoted anywhere from 90 degrees to sometimes 180 degrees, and everything's going in the opposite direction. And I think almost everybody watching this podcast right now has seen everything shift almost to 180 degrees in the last 3 years. Because as soon as all this AI hype came out in 2022, the world has forever changed. So you already are feeling all of this now.
Absolutely. So now let's talk about a typical problem that you run into in innovation, right? So now you have the method to the madness. This is how you identify what the problems are, how to solve them, where to solve them. Now, the question you get after that is, when do you solve it? There's two areas that I like to talk about. Now, this is something near and dear to me because I did a startup, and my problem was we were very, very early to the game. And when the game happened, it was instigated by 5G, and then that is the golden zone to be able to act. So we had a lot of infrastructure underneath, and we were trying to sell things in an early adopter kind of manner, and we were ready for the market change. And we rode the market up into the Goldilocks zone. And then we were able to act really quickly. But there's a lot of pain, and it's really hard to get investment dollars on we believe the world is going to be like this in 5 years, so we're building for 5 years into the future. Now, it's also equally painful on being late to the party. So having a market opportunity and a view of when is this needed. A lot of stuff you'll run into is people are like, hey, we need this now. We need to do it now. You got to ask your question of, is this something we need to do now? Or is technology changing, as we talked about before, the chat bot versus the agentics, and pick when you want to do it. Because it may be a problem that solves itself in 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And if that's the case, you can use your customer goodwill and let the problem solve itself. Okay? So investment timing is very important. The other thing is, if you are in the early adoption, you have the capability of, I call it a time machine, patenting, right? You could take a solution to the problem that in 5 years is going to be the ultimate thing, and you can patent the solution today and not invest beyond the patent, so that when things start maturing and changing in the marketplace, you can jump on that, build it, and go to market. And you'll go to market with a patent and a solution, right? So that no one else can jump in there. So again, patents are really valuable in your innovation game, used as I said, as a time machine. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I saw a couple of interesting articles recently about talking about patents and trademarks and things of that nature. And basically the article was saying, even if you're not ready to execute it, get these things, get the filings done in advance so that if the market feasibility turns out to be, 6 months, 3 months, even a year and a half down the road, this is already behind you and you can just execute that much faster.
Absolutely. Now, this is the thing that you need to be looking over your shoulder on, the asymmetric threats. So looking at Gartner and knowing what Gartner is telling you, or Forrester, or there's quite a few analyst firms out there, they will tell you what's going on. They will tell you the past. They will tell you the present. But there are really smart people who are doing startups. I know this because I used to be one of them. I know a lot of them. And they were going to try to beat you with a good enough product, right? So they're going to go in and say, yes, you are superior, right? You solve 100% of the problem for X amount. But I can solve 80% of it for 10% of your cost. They're going to dig into your moat, right? So understanding, and I talked about before, having that good, honest conversation with you and your team. If you were a tech startup, how can you go in there and how can you compete with something you already have? It'll help you understand these good enough threats. And again, if you have the wherewithal, acquisition is a possibility for R&D. There are hundreds, thousands, millions of startups out there that have an idea and they're executing on that idea and they are building a moat. The problem is they have the moat, but they don't have the fortress. So you can buy a moat. I know it'll be temporary. You have to solve your innovation process issues first, but you can buy time through acquisition. And a lot of the people you get through acquisition are incredibly valuable to you that are going to make your business work better. Having differentiation in thought and practice and experience is a benefit to your organization.
Yeah, if we look into the current landscape, just something to bring up because I'm seeing this, and I thought one time it was an anomaly, and I don't necessarily have great concrete examples that I can give you because I don't have any visuals to go with it, but there's a new Silicon Valley strategy that seemed to have taken off about mid-2025. And that is the acquisition of buying the intellectual property and or the human assets in that organization, just kind of letting the company just kind of hang out either on its own or be piecemealed and sold off. So the whole, if you're considering strategy and acquisition as your new R&D approach, just know that those new approaches in Silicon Valley are also there for you. And it's interesting the way that how they're unfolding those deals to essentially avoid monopolies and all kinds of other stuff that comes along with the ride with regulatory and stuff. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this aggressively in 2026, especially in the area of AI, as many startups are bringing that 80-20 rule to bring that into the picture. So it's definitely going to be very, very interesting. And you're going to start seeing these fortresses get bigger and bigger and bigger as all of these smaller companies start getting gobbled up in that way. Yeah.
So I've been talking a lot about strategy at that 5,000-foot view of what you need to do, what you need to think, what kind of people, what kind of frameworks you need to think in your mind of how to accomplish innovation. And let's start talking about tactics, right? I call it the sidecar. Right. So let's say you have your mainstay project, your mainstay product, your mainstay services. having a much smaller innovation group that's going to be, how do we attack and solve this problem on the side, right? So you don't need the entire stack of what your product is. You're just trying to prove out a feature or a different way of doing things. And you can do that in a sidecar manner, right? APIs and AI and integration strategies exist to allow you to do this very effectively, to be able to get all the data in and do something different, show it differently, do analytics, provide a different dashboard, right? Those kind of things. It allows you to have that experimental area where you're not affecting your main customers, you're not affecting your current revenue streams, but what you're doing is you're sitting on top of something that is effectively your moat today, your commodity tomorrow, and you're understanding, okay, can we go in a different direction? Can we prove out this idea? Because that is the most important part of this sidecar strategy, being surgical and having the data to understand if the approach is worth the time. Or as I call it, the Kenny Rogers rule, right? Code is disposable, but business metrics are permanent. So you have your new idea. You need to think in 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, I need to prove out whether or not this idea is worth the effort, it's worth the change, it's worth the impact that we are trying to get from it. And then you create your metrics before the 6-week period, right? You need to instill also this concept of failing is okay. Don't fake the data, right? You are an innovation team. Your job is to figure out, does this make sense? Is this going to provide value? You have 6 weeks, and this is your mission, right? Here is your metric. You're going to do this. You're going to check this, and this is how we know. And either you're going to hold or fold. And then if you do, and it shows that it helps, then you can hand this over to your digital transformation team, as we talked about before, and they could start implementing those changes. And so your innovation team moves on to the next on the long list of things. Can we do this? Is it worth it? And they have 6 weeks to prove it. And this is how innovation works. It doesn't start by a blank sheet, right? It doesn't start by telling everybody, hey, we're going to be changing, we're going to be crazy, everything. No, you can't do that. You have to be a surgical approach. It has to be data-driven, and you got to have outcomes that are achievable in a short period of time, because you should not need 3, 6, 9 months to prove out if it's a good idea or a bad idea. And just because one person or many people say or think it's a good idea doesn't matter. What's matter is what can you prove? Because if you have the data, if you have the proof, and you make the investment and it doesn't work out, well, then now you know, right? But if you make the investment and you never check it, you never test it, and you implement it and it doesn't work out, well, guess what? Someone's getting fired, right? Innovation in Fortune 500 is considered risky because of this problem. So you need to downsize the risk so that your people are more comfortable accepting those risks. David?
Yeah, I think, I go back to think about the observability thing that I was talking about earlier, and thinking this applies to what we're talking about here. And we also had given the advice about not boiling the ocean. Smaller iterative successes to have people to have buy-in along the path. For me personally, it's about taking a grand idea and showing them an element and prioritizing that to see, hey, this is the biggest problem we have. Obviously, we've got all these things on the checklist, but this is a really quick way of fixing this problem. What do you think of that? And solicit feedback and work your way through it. But yeah, I think, everything that you just said, but the only thing that I would just say that I've had personal success with in a lot of these companies internally in our own company, as well as, what I've seen happen with customers and stuff that I've seen that's not worked too good. I'm thinking 3 companies actually this year, but it's because they tried to take on too much too fast because the timing, and this is, I think, the trap that everybody's falling into. And I think maybe this is a slight add to what you've got here. Timing is your enemy on this, because you're going to be like the devil and the angel on both shoulders. Time, do it now, give it to me now. And at the same time, controlled growth, there's something to be said for that. So balancing between those two, there is no formula. It's every culture, every individual, whoever you're dealing with. It's just one of those things to where, hey, if you're not sure, bring in somebody that you know in your org that knows the landscape, that knows maybe how to help navigate that. Because the success, ultimately, at the end of the day, you're trying to achieve success for either your department or your company as a whole. And taking these on in smaller bite-sized chunk and having the team or yourself experience those quick wins in an iterative way will get you to where you need to go. So the approach, it may not be a one size fits all for everybody. That's the only caution thing I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, again, one of the leaders in the organization that I'm in right now talks about how the difference is excellence, right? That's why people will call you, is your excellence. So I want to revert back. I talked a little bit about the strategy of moats and what they are and their building. I talked about how you have these uncomfortable conversations. You talk to sales, you talk to support, you talk to engineering. This is your strategy, right? I talked about the tactics. This is how you execute. Now, what's important is having the track records, the excellence in execution, because that is the true moat, right? It is the fortress that the moat is supporting, right? So innovation, if you get to a point where you are constantly innovating, you're constantly providing valuable change to your organization, to your customers, you're going to see it in these 2 ways. Number one, your sales and marketing will think of it as a cheat code. Like, they're going to come to their job knowing that they've got the easiest job on the world, right? They are selling what is easily sold. All they have to do is tell people and they will consume it, right? So they're going to see the results of this, of what innovation is all about, as that cheat code. Number 2 is it's going to be a promise that your customers know that when they invest in you, your people, your processes, your services, your software, your products, that they know you are constantly getting better and leveling up, that they never have to break up with you because they're constantly improving, right? So that's what innovation is all about. This is why innovation is important. It's going to make your sales and marketing easier. It's going to make your customers stick with you. And in the world of AI, tomorrow somebody is going to talk to your customer and say, hey, I want your business for 50% less than you're paying your normal guys. And you want to be in a situation where that customer says, well, guess what? I don't trust that because I know they're constantly improving. So I'm not even going to waste my time looking at it because I think it's too good to be true. That is defense. That is what the moat is all about. It isn't about, hey, you're the best in your area. You are in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. It isn't about that. It's about your customer knowing that you are constantly improving your technology, your people, and your processes. So, this is the call to architectural leadership. Sustainable innovation is the act of deciding that you will not be a victim of change, but an architect of it. And that the moats that you need to build are waiting to be dug.
Excellent. No, great information. And I think this will plant some seeds in a lot of people's mind's eye. And again, if you guys have any questions, if you guys go out and visit us at our website, at the Transformation Leaders Podcast, I'll put the URL down here at the bottom of the screen. If you check that out, you can reach out to Sean or myself one-on-one, ask us additional questions that you may have. There's a form at the bottom of the page, so you can fill that out and you'll hit both Sean and I at the same time. But if you want to hit us one-on-one, like for example, Sean had a lot of great information. You may have questions of him today. And if you do, go ahead and reach out to him that way. More than happy to help you there. And then just some housekeeping stuff for you guys. If you liked what you saw today, there's a QR code at the top left corner. Thought it was right. Had to get my left and right. Or left and right correct. At the top left corner, you have that QR code. That'll allow you to download this deck. So maybe you saw something of interest, caught your eye. You want to go ahead and recap or grab it or share it internally with folks. Go ahead and grab that now. There's the QR code there. There's an accompanying white paper. I'm going to swap out the QR code now. And if you rescan or scan the QR code, you'll get the white paper that's not being shown here on screen. But there's a whole white paper behind this methodology and everything that Sean was talking about today. So go ahead and grab that as well. If for any reason these QR codes are not working for you, again, back at our website, you can shoot us an email. One of us will respond. And we'll shoot you out a link, a hard link, a traditional link to get it in the normal way. We are here every Wednesday at 12 o'clock Eastern time, noon. So we look forward to seeing you each and every week. But that's it and a wrap for this show. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. And we'll see y'all next week. Bye-bye.